Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Cello Circle chat. I'm here with Kara Eubanks. I want to remind everybody that this is free, but donations are encouraged. So there's information about donations on my website. So, Kara, welcome.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you. I've been very excited about this talk for a very long time.
Ew.
What could you tell me a little bit about? I actually don't know you. So, what you do and what you've been doing?
Yeah. I am a Suzuki violin teacher and I'm a violinist in Eugene, Oregon. I run a private studio of 20 young violinists. I am also a mom of a 5 and 2-year-old boys. I am married to a music theorist who teaches here at the University of Oregon. So we have a fun musical house. And yeah, I think that's it.
That's great. Um, we're here to talk today about child-led learning, democratic schooling, things that aren't top-down, basically, in the teaching world. And I've come to this mostly through Peter Gray lately during this pandemic. And I realized that I've been pretty dictatorial in the way I teach. I would say I'm a loving dictator, and I can
Uh-huh.
fool any kid into thinking that they love my plan. I'm really good at it, very personable, but it's not their plan. And then the last few years, I've been more and more disinterested in my own way of going about teaching children. And I know you're along a similar line. Could you tell me how you came to where you are in that regard?
Um, yeah, there are a couple of things. One is before teaching in Oregon, I taught in New York and I taught in the Midwest. And when I got to Oregon, specifically into Eugene, there's just a really different culture of parenting here that I just hadn't been exposed to, which was a very child-led home. And that was going to be really different with Suzuki teaching because I think that my students have always had fun and enjoyed learning. And I think it's always been a really good time. And I definitely, I'm not rejecting the lessons that I taught that were more teacher led, but I had families come to me where that just wasn't going to work for them, right? Like if in the home the child makes decisions for themselves, they might not have fun being led through an experience in the lesson, no matter how much fun that experience is. So I would say in my studio, I have families that are more adult-led homes and more child-led homes. And to be honest, I don't see a happiness difference. I don't see a success difference. I don't see like a I just I have really really awesome families that I get to hang out with all the time. Um, but for the kids in child-led homes, um, families would leave the violin out on the table and say, well, they just pick it up and play. And at first I was kind of like, no, the violin goes in the case, the parent takes out like I had like this protocol. And what I recognized was that if I held to that these kids weren't going to play. So then I guess my choice was either I stick to my thing and I teach a self-selecting group, and those kids get to play classical music, and the other kids actually learn, they believe that they hate classical music actually because they just don't like that experience. It doesn't fit with how adults treat them in their lives. So i I guess I teach in two ways now, and it just depends on what's fun for that kid. So
Oh, so
for
you have parts of your studio that are teacher led and parts of your studio that are student led based on how they are probably at home.
Well, the what the studio looks like is very average. I have group classes, I have lessons, um, but what happens in the lesson is really different depending on the child. So some kids it comes in and it looks like a really classic Suzuki lesson. And some kids come in and I say, what's the plan? And no matter which the kid is, I guess this comes from thinking like what, they always say like be the teacher you always needed.
Right.
And I mean, I had some really wonderful teachers, so that sounds kind of disparaging of teachers that you've had. But if I think what would have really been great for me, it would have been like a big sister who played the violin, who was like really nice to me and would show me all the tricks, but also like totally believe in me and not look down on me for knowing less than she did. I guess this could have been a brother. I'm saying she. but But so I have some kids who come in where if I like lead them through the experience of a lesson, which I'm also very attracted to because it can be so joyful and fun. But some kids I say, what's the plan? And they tell me. And I guess I could be kind of their prop. Um, they're doing the thing. I'm spending time with them. And it's much better to spend time with me who knows how to play the violin very well than to be alone. So I'm a resource. But I also am not, I might say, if I were you, I would probably play this a lot of times. If they're like, I'm like, okay. Like and I think it's not necessarily just out of wanting to treat them with respect, which it is, but it's also, I don't think that it's useful or effective to ever make somebody do something they don't want to do.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if you could convince them to do it. If they haven't come to wanting to do it, like actively wanting to do it, I don't think the goods are there.
Right. They need that in order to, I kind of equate it to when we teach adults. So many people teach adults differently than they teach kids. And I feel like, why is that? I think it's because we view kids as less than whole. From infancy, right, there's all sorts of people, like Magda Gerber and Janet Lansbury, and people
Yeah.
like that who view an infant as a whole person, and then those infants end up sometimes very different, turning into very different toddlers. And so, that we can take an adult and trust them and just say, I know you didn't practice this week, but let's just do some stuff together. We can still get some good things done, and let's just play and expose you to some more music with someone who's a professional. And why can't we do that instead of with a kid? Some people, if that adult student spouse said, you need to practice every day for an hour because our money is going into your lessons. And let's say that that's the working spouse. And they said, my working money is going into your lessons. So, I mean, what kind of argument is that for
Yeah.
motivating the self
But,
to work harder at something that you want? That person's there because they want it. Most kids are in lessons. I would think most kids are in lessons because they want it. There are the few, I would say. I think it's in my studio at least, that it's very rare that the student doesn't want it for themselves on some level. It's just being able to tap into that.
and I had parenting books together kind of nonstop. And at a certain point, you kind of find your camp of like, this resonates with me. And, they're kind of, so eventually we kind of were like, all these parenting books, are these just books about how to be nice to people?
It's so true, right? It's how to treat others with respect.
I think this very humbly, as in like, this is what we felt like we really needed. This is what we needed to hear. We didn't have a problem following a protocol or anything like that, but we kind of needed to hear like, hey, here's how to be nice to people who may live in your home, who
And
might,
are your bloodline.
might be dependent on you for their very survival. So
Right, exactly.
I think, everyone who's a teacher who then becomes a parent um, has a lot change in how they see kids because your relationship with your own kid is so um, dynamic and intense. But I think recognizing that what was going on between me and my child is also going on between every parent and child that I teach was just transformative. So then things like Cohen's Unconditional Parenting, John Holt's How Children Learn, or John Holt's Teach Your Own, and recognizing, oh, this is what's going on in so many homes. And this is why when I say, let's play this game, that kid looks at me like, oh, come on.
I'm going to put a couple links in the chat box for people who are here. There's Alfie Cohen, and then what was the other thing? How Children Learn. I will put that in the chat box as well. I'll share it on the screen right now just for people who are watching a video. I don't plan on sharing this chat room. So here's How Children Learn. There's the Amazon link, but by John Holt. And then this is Alfie Cohen's website, and he wrote Unconditional Parenting, which Kara just referred to.
Going in order, like if
I'm sorry, say that again.
if I hadn't read either one, I'd read John Holt first because he came first by 50-ish years.
Yeah, exactly. And then the thing that I am really into these days is A.S. Neal, who started the Summerhill School, and there's the link right there. I'll in the chat box. And this is the Summerhill School website. And Summerhill School is a democratic school, so I'm really into the democratic school and schooling, and this is one, and Sudbury Valley is another one that's democratic, and we'll probably refer to these things pretty often during this talk, so I'll just put these all in the chat as now so that you can see it at your own leisure. So what's interesting about what you just said is you're kind of coming at it from an opposite side than me. You're coming at it because you felt the need in your studio to address the needs in your studio, to really work with the student base that you have. And it's funny because I feel like I'm coming to it like there's a whole world out there that people don't even know about. They don't even know. My students, most of them don't even know it's possible to take control of their education and to have an equal say in an equal partnership with parents and teacher and student, all having a say in what's going to happen next. And so I think actually yours is a little bit more evolved because you're really responding to what's already there. And I think I might be trying to force something that's not really there. Hang on a sec. 네.
엄마 3시 지났어.
4시? 아니 3시 지났어. 맞아. 오케이, 엄마 얘기해야 해요. Okay. She said it's past 3. I was like, yes, it's past 3.
Even, I have students who come in and are ready for that lesson guided experience, right? And they kind of come in and they kind of look at me like, okay, do the thing, And I would say it's equally democratic actually, because
that's what they want.
And even in the more teacher-led lesson and adult-led home, there's still the democracy isn't missing. The parents are very much consulting with their kids, and I think there is an equal say. I do think that that's present even in those teacher-led lessons.
That's a really great point. I think that's really healthy because this is so new to me. This is all like pandemic new to me, that I think I've gone a really extreme route.
One of the things that John Holt says in How Children Learn is that the way a child learns something if they're on their own is to kind of go holistically and try to do the whole thing and put the parts into it. And the way that we teach Suzuki is so incremental, small steps mastery, right? And so if it's child-led, you definitely are not going to see the incremental outcomes in the same way. And I'm so fine with that. I mean, I think if I showed you a portfolio of like, here are the 20 students that I teach, tell me which ones come from tell me which ones are child-led lessons and tell me which ones are teacher-led lessons. I don't think you could tell me.
Could you speak a little bit more to that? So when you are teaching students that come from child-led homes, then you are doing a more global approach, you're saying. So let's get to the nuts and bolts of it. Let's say you're in a lesson with a kid. Can you give examples of how you would go about with that kind of lesson?
Yeah, I mean, so the kid comes in my door if there weren't a pandemic, and I say, "What are we doing today?" And I should say that I have seen teacher-led lessons do that also, and that is where I got the idea. Because as much as I teach in this way, and this is me and my students, I am very, very attracted to many teachers who are very incremental and very much leaders, and who are very beautiful and positive teachers. So I'd say, what do you want to do? And then they'll tell me what they want to play. And I'd say, okay, how do you want to do it? Do you want to play it for me? Do you want me to play it with you? Do you want to? I have a student who sometimes wants me to play it for her. And I say yes. Whatever it is, I say yes.
Is
And
that a good way of kind of summarizing it? Is that it's a yes lesson, basically?
I would never say, no, I won't do that. I don't think I could. No, I would never say, no, I wouldn't do that. But and if it is really democratic, I think I hope that they feel this as much as I feel it. There is like mutual respect, like maybe I respect them way more. Like I think that they're just so amazing, and every brain that comes in here I think is so amazing. I believe in just the infinite ability of every human, and I think that that respect is so so strong, and I have really really strong relationships with each kid that that I think I can also be really honest with them. So if they're playing something and I'm just like, they don't know about this thing, like I want them to know about this thing, I might ask, like, can I tell you about this thing?
So
Or
that's how you go about it. You just say, this might help you. Would you rather go about the way you've been going, or let me insert this other thing, or would that be too overwhelming? Or you just
yeah, I would say I don't
offer
want
it up.
like if you're like on a thing, I'm not going to get in your way, but if you're interested, I have something you might be interested in. And usually they will say, yeah, okay. Occasionally they'll be like, I want to do this, this, and this next.
Let's say you have a student who is in pain because of whatever technical issue and doesn't want to address the technical issue but wants to further their playing, that kind of. But you see in the big picture, because you have this insight past where they are in one moment, that that will keep them from, let's say, a bad bow hold, or they're playing, let's say they're playing like this, and this is going to keep them from playing the fast pieces without pain, or playing the fast pieces accurately and in tune, that kind of thing. Then but the student doesn't feel like the need to correct this. How would you go about doing that?
I wouldn't be shy to mention it. No, I wouldn't be shy at all. I wouldn't even be shy to mention it a lot because, like I said, I think if it's democratic, that means that I also get a say. You know, I think that it's not like, it's, if I remove myself from the relationship, then there's something kind of unhealthy about that too. Um, but I would say that if I feel like something is falling on deaf ears, then number one, I would not lose respect for the kid, and I wouldn't think it's a fault or like a shortcoming or a lack of ability or anything like that. I would just think it's not time. It's
Right.
there's a part in how children learn, and I just keep talking about this one book. I guess I love it, or it's on my mind today, where it sounds like Suzuki wrote it. He says, well, have you noticed how children master their native languages with such ease and fluency and they don't do any exercises? And I was like, what? And I'm like waiting for the quote to come to say that it was Suzuki. And I don't know if John Holt knew about Suzuki very much. He probably did because he played the cello. But then he talks about the fear of bad habits. And and this is a relatively forming thought in my life, so I probably shouldn't say it to who knows who, but it's okay. I'm very skeptical of bad habits being hard to break.
Amen. That's actually a new idea for me too, but I completely believe in it now.
If I don't have the tool that I need, I can't break the bad habit. But when I realize what I need and what's getting in my way, I had a bow hold issue that just nagged me and nagged me and nagged me. And the very first day of my Suzuki teacher training with Ann Monska Smeltzer, she said at the end, she said, "Do you have any questions you'd just like to ask me?" I was doing this training one-on-one, so it was like really glorious. And I said, "Yeah, my bow hold." I was so embarrassed. And she gave me an answer, and it was done. It was done.
What do you mean it was done?
I had to work on it. I never had to practice it. And
Like you just integrated it right away, you mean?
I was the answer. I had done the searching on my own. I knew what I wanted to ask. The expert was there. It was the moment. And she said, "Do this with your elbow. See, you're sliding this way and put your elbow here." And I was like, "Thank you."
And that's the thing, like so many of us know that there's certain times in our life when we need certain people and or certain information. Like for me, I'm on this big kick about Irene Sharp. I worked with her 20 years ago and I refused to watch her teach. And now I'm trying to find everything I can about her and her teacher. So it's really interesting like that as we as teachers go into these relationships, I think so many people get bogged down in the idea that we need to relay this piece of information now. And the really great beauty about what you're saying is that you could just put it out there and then wait. And this is the thing about child-led mentality that I feel like is the biggest keyword is just wait. Why don't you say something and just wait and see what happens? And then beautiful things happen.
Yeah, there are two things that I just am dying to share with you about that thought. One is I worked for when I was doing my doctorate, I kind of oddly started working in student learning outcomes assessment. So I know all about outcomes assessment, and I was good at it and I enjoyed it. And
Wait, tell me, just define what that is. I think I know what that is, but better to define it.
designing a course or a program. So you say by the end of this unit, course, degree, these are the competencies that we should see, and these are the tasks how we get there, and then these are the assessments that show it. So it's a really nice way to organize your thoughts and go like, what does that mean to say somebody's good at the violin? Like, what the heck does that even mean? So I really enjoyed it because I love to teach and I love to learn. But there is the idea of outcomes is so American education at least is saturated with the idea of outcomes to the point where if we don't see an outcome at a certain moment, we doubt ourselves completely. We think we're doing everything wrong, or something's wrong with the student, or something's wrong with the teacher, or something's wrong with the curriculum. And I just think that it's not that clean. And it's not, I mean, sometimes it does work that way. Sometimes it's really a clean process. And that's really cool. But I think you have to have a personality match where the teacher teaches in a really clean, incremental way, and the student jives with that. And I think it just has to be kind of a certain setup. And I'm not against it at all, because I think sometimes sometimes it's just super good vibes and really good learning. But as someone who is not an incremental anything, I used to actually feel pretty bad that those kinds of things didn't work for me, and that I can't stick to things, right? Because I get a new idea and it changes this or that. And, but then, so where am I going with this? Um, so anyway, the idea that we're not seeing an outcome means that something's wrong, I don't think is true, because it might just not be time. And then the other thing is, you were saying, I have this John Holt quote here, and I just really want to read it, even though this is not supposed to be a John Holt talk.
I don't mind if this turns into John Holt talk. I would love to hear more about him.
I said,
My chair keeps on falling down. So annoying.
oh, okay, so this is like, um, I love this. I'm just going to read it. So this is John Holt talking about himself. For a long time, I've been interested in my own thoughts, feelings, and motives, eager to know as much as I can of the truth about myself. After many years, I think that at most, I may know something about a very small part of what goes on in my head. How preposterous to imagine that I can know what goes on in someone else's.
That's so true, right?
How really, really beautiful to neither diagnose what's going on. I mean, it's just such a respectful position.
That's the I think, some of the things that come back, and I just posted a link to Janet Lansbury's page. She's a proponent of Magda Gerber, and all these people, Montessori, Magda Gerber, John Hill, John Holt, all these people I think were at the same time, and there was something going on in the world. It's this post-war thing, and this really reimagining of the human spirit and the respect for others after a world war, right? So I think that respect, Janet Lansbury is really into respectful parenting, and this kind of respect for the other person as a full self is so powerful. And when I think that the biggest thing for me in terms of this respect was I was teaching a student. I keep on coming back to one student in my head that I'm having trouble teaching these days. I tried telling him what to do, and he got really caught up in pleasing me. And I said, well, let's do what you want to do. And then he got really caught up in pleasing me because now he didn't know what I needed or what I wanted. And it was like the opposite effect. And then I just realized I was talking to him in a way that I would never be caught dead talking to my friends. The way I was giving him corrections, saying, well, what, try that again. You could do that. I know you can do that. Why don't you do that again? It's like, if I said that to one of my friends, like, you should just do that again, or it was so disrespectful. Actually, it was kind at the surface, but at the core of it, there was a sense of disrespect. And when I talk to my students now, I just think, is this how I would talk to my parents? Is this how I would teach my best friend? And if the answer is no, and the number of times the answer has been no, I mean, I've been doing that for the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I'm just shocking myself. So disappointed. But I'm not saying that I'm a bad person. I still think that I'm an effective teacher and I'm a good person, and this is all a blip in time, but it's such a good perspective change on how to look at the lessons.
No, I think there's different teachers have a really different amount of personal distance between themselves and their students. Some people just have different boundaries. One thing that I don't want to contradict what you're saying, but to add like a different relationship to imagine is some people love to have a personal trainer. But that person does say like, good job, you can do it, you can do it. And
That's true.
really, like my mom works with a personal trainer and she just gets jazzed by that kind of thing, So I think it might just be a matter of personality. And some of my favorite teachers to watch are very much that way of like, they're very good at knowing how much to like be like, let's do it, we're gonna break through this, and but I think it matters so much, like, what are the two personalities, what's the relationship, how close is the relationship, what's, more than the age. I think age is less of a factor. That person could be 4 or 64. And I would say that, yeah, but the best friend thing, I definitely have students that when we're in a lesson, it is like I'm being their friend, like I'm their friend who knows how to play the violin, and it's super valuable time. It's not like we're just hanging out, right? But the feel of they're there on their terms, and what we're doing together is making this music and working on how to play this instrument. But
I was wondering if I could derail us a little bit. There are two other things I'd really love to hear your thoughts about. And the two are one is taking the teacher out of the equation, and the other is group class, right? So maybe if you could you tell me about your group classes and what they look like?
so normally my group classes, I will say, I would be very shy to video them because they are I would say that they get rowdier than sometimes I can like wrap my mind around, but the kids are on task. Like they're not talking about what happened at school. They are making music. They're very busy. Um, but
So what could you describe that even more? Maybe you're in the middle of it.
I'm definitely the ringleader of the group class, but we do take turns teaching. So I might tell a student in a lesson, like if they're doing something, I would say, do you want to teach something about that in group class this week? And then they'll just take 10 minutes and teach for a while. They'll be like, I made up these bow exercises, or I've been thinking this about this piece, let's play it this way. Or, oh, a good example is I had a book 4 student that was doing the bone perpetual motion, and she said, where are the singles? And she said, perpetual motions are supposed to have singles and then you learn the doubles.
That's awesome.
I was like, smart, very awesome. And she's like, okay, in group class, I'll lead us. We'll do the singles. So then
That's great.
I have done teacherless group classes a couple of times. When I was teaching in the Midwest, our group classes were every other week. So my older kids would have group class every week, and I was there one week and not there the other week. And it was a parent's job to provide the space and buy the pizza. And other than that, the kids were on their own to do the thing.
Oh, that's brilliant. So you did it in private homes. Oh, I've been trying to figure out how that would work.
And then whenever I've had a baby, I have set the group classes free, and I've said, you guys don't need me. You have group class with me all the time. Go do it. And they've had a great time. And I really think that if they go up for group class, they could do it. They don't play the violin at the level that I do. So my vision is super valuable, but sometimes their vision is really valuable too.
Do you
So
know what do they talk about those group classes with you? Do you know what they end up doing?
I've always just had a baby, so I'm pretty pretty busy. But the guidance that I've really asked parents to do is to not have a parent stand in as teacher, but to really let the kids do it. Because the parents are so good, they could lead a group class, like they know so much. Like they could write a book on how to play the violin, even though they just watch. So, no, I don't entirely know. Also, during the pandemic, I'm not holding, I do Zoom group classes, and I'm high risk, so I'm not going to hold an outdoor group class even, just in case a kid were to run up and give me a hug. And but I recognize that a lot of people are doing that. And I've said, because of my own risk, I'm not going to lead an outdoor group class. But if you're comfortable, why don't you just have like a violin play date and just like do that without me? So a couple people have, really outdoors and socially distanced kind of met up and done things. And
That's great. Have you ever done it in a class what do your group classes look like? Do you usually plan out your group class, like what the general outline of what you want to do, and then have and then kind of go and see how it rolls out.
What I want to do. I make it a 50-50 split of technique and repertoire. And I have things that I want to play. And I just have really fun things to do. So I would say those are pretty teacher led. If I had any sense that the kids didn't want to do it, I'd be walking that back real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. My goal of group class, I said if I ever write a how to practice with your kid book, I'm going to call it the no nag practice solution. Trademark.
Trademark.
I'm tempted to nag about in a lesson, I just zip it, and we'll all do something with that concept in group class. And I do like games just because I like games, not because I think that kids are less smart and they need to play a game or something, or they're not ready to do something serious. Some kids are super serious, but I like to play games. So yeah, it's whatever I might have been tempted to nag somebody about in a private lesson, do it in group. Because if one kid needs it, everybody needs it, I think.
Absolutely, right. I mean, the other thing that I was curious about your thoughts is, and I might go on a little bit, but I've really been looking into linguistics a lot lately, and the current general acknowledged practice, especially for second language acquisition, is to not study grammar, to not study vocab, and to just do that total immersion type of thing, and to be surrounded by so much. And then other ideas on top of that are there's no such thing as junk reading. So you just have, like my daughter has, the example I always use is my daughter has the Butt Detective, right? That's like a big go-to book is the Butt Detective. And yet that's legit because there are words in the Butt Detective and there are concepts about investigation in there that are really legit. And that's not bad. And two cellos and Frozen, and there's some books out there that some of these Frozen arrangements they're hard, coming in after a 16th rest with da 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 da. It's and it gets really high, and there are these things, but I don't really have those around. And what these linguists say is the thing is, you come out of the womb, if you're a typical child, you come out of the womb talking. You don't have to learn how to play your instrument, which is different for us. But after that, you're surrounded by it, which is very Suzuki. You get the listening going, have the parent playing, have it in the home. But then after that, the linguist takes it one extra step and says, the kids will learn their accent from other children. They don't learn their accent from their parent. So their native tongue or their surrounding language really affects them in a way that parents can't even have an effect. So what that means is that when we're teaching even classical music, maybe we can have this junk reading around, like junk. I say junk, but I don't mean it that way. I'm just using this terminology that was in the paper, but of so much static on my line. I don't know what's happening. But it would be, two cellos for the Frozen, Harry Potter, or just any book, even supplementary things that are really legit, like Essential Elements, Vamoosh, or things like that. So I wonder if it's possible to put kids in a room once they learn to play, like a book 2, 3 level around there. And then do they really need us after then? Like, do they really need us to guide them, especially in a group setting? Maybe they still do in the private lesson, but can't we just set them free in some way? And I wonder if you've thought about that or if you have ideas on that.
The thing that I think I'm thinking more about is I think I do a lot more of the teaching in the group and less in the private lesson than a lot of teachers. Like I am very, very like, if you're gonna sign up for lessons with me, you're swearing on your life you're coming to group class every week. Because I can't help
That's so opposite of where I was going. Did you come to that on purpose, or does it just kind of end up that way?
works when I it's just what works for me. And I teach, like, I have a teaching partner now, but I haven't until this summer. So, and now we're on Zoom, so it's kind of, I don't know, new, but she's awesome. I'll talk about her another time. She's amazing. But so in terms of setting the kids free, they're so free in their private lesson. And sometimes I'm their teacher and sometimes much less so. In the group, I would say I'm more of a teacher. Um, I think that they need all of it. I think, the thing of when you compare it to language acquisition, you spend so much time with the language. Oh, I was thinking about this yesterday. Okay, so you want the kid to learn French, right? And I'm thinking about this because we have immersion schools here in Eugene, Oregon. And now that like there's no school, everybody's like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do immersion when they're on Zoom for 90 minutes a day or something like that?
Exactly.
I was thinking, okay, what everybody says is if you want your kid to learn French, you drop them in France, right? And then I was like, this is a fun thought experiment. Okay, you drop them in France. Where? In the middle of a street in France? They're not going to learn French. They're going to get hit by a car. Bad plan. Okay, so we need to get more specific. Then the next thought is, do you drop them in a public school in France? Uh-uh. Because then they're in an environment where they don't speak the language. There's a teacher giving them a grade on what they're doing. They're trying to do things that might be hard, that might be not very organic. That's not going to get it. So when we're talking about learning like language and learning as just humanly as possible, I think peer time with the adults out is very important because that is definitely how kids learn to speak.
Right. Yeah.
A teacherless group class is an awesome idea. There is the safety of the instruments as an issue, like just in case they sword fight with the bows. Um, but I also think that some parentless practice is really, really good. And with my own, so I have a 5-year-old, and we started doing violin when he was 4. And it was like there was a short honeymoon, and then it suddenly like occurred to both of us that this was like the first time I'd ever like told him to do anything. And it was like kind of a stupid,
Same. Yeah, it's the same experience.
like it turned from like kind of fun vibes of like we're playing in mama's office to like this isn't our thing, right? So after a while I was like, are you having fun? Like, do you like this? And he was like, no. So I was like, do you want to like take a break and we can think about this later? And so we were like, okay, we'll take a break. And then I asked him if he wants, I was like, are you interested in violin? And he's like, I'm always interested in violin. So now we're in pandemic life and we have it's not a nanny, it's a pool teacher who's bubbling with our family. And he's going to go to her house and I'm going to send him with a violin for him, a violin for her. She doesn't play the violin. And an iPad that has Jam Easy, Staff Wars, Rhythm Cat, some like stuff to play with. He knows so much about how to play the violin already. Like he can play everything from book 1. So I think if I set a 5-year-old and an adult and a bunch of very I don't know, very dynamic materials together.
Right.
I don't think that right now teaching him, because he's not going to have a group class, etc. I don't think it'd be super fun. So yeah, I think in that case, a teacherless environment is probably the most productive. And I think that teacherless setup could work for a lot of, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that with that idea, I have so many thoughts. I can't even organize them. Um, if you are at a book 2, book 3 level, I think most of my students then would be safe when they're in their right state of mind, right? But we know that kids can get excited and then not be involved with the safety of their instrument or something. But I do think that without the adult present, you know, what all of these things like the Sudbury Valley School and Peter Gray and Bernard Greenberg, that's not his first name, but Donald Greenberg, what they're saying is if you take the adult out of the room, then there's going to be some child that says it's not going to be like Lord of the Flies, right? It is if you do it in the wrong way. You know, I've done experiments with my students where I stick them in my basement and I say, why don't you try to learn simple gifts? And I leave and I give them one computer. You know, like I've been inspired by like Sugata Mitra and all of his, there are these experiments where you just have one computer and kids can do so much. And I tried to set this, and it really did turn into Lord of the Flies. There were kids dropping the F-bomb on each other, kids crying in the corner. There was bullying, siblings were fighting. It was like, I did record it because I needed to know. And I was like, I'm never going to do that again. But that's because I took a bunch of kids who aren't used to that environment and I threw them in together. And I think if we can ease them into this environment where there are rules, in a democratic classroom, there are rules. And even when the adult is present or isn't present, that everyone has the same respect for whatever rules are agreed upon, then I think that that kind of thing might be able to work. I don't really know that though.
I think even the presence of an adult wouldn't wouldn't necessarily mess that up. Um, you know, one of the things that Janet Lansbury says is if your child says, will you play this with me? And you really don't want to, that you should say, you know, I really want to do this right now. So I'm going to do this. Can we play that later? And I think that was really powerful for me to read because at first I really interpreted respect and democracy as always do what your child wants and says.
Right? It's so tempting to read it that way when you're not used to it.
Because you're so aware of the power dynamic in the first place that you're trying to overcompensate. But if it's really democratic, then the adult in the room also has a voice. It's just that they don't have the ruling voice.
Right, right. Oh, this is so good. I could talk to you for so long about all of this. What are we missing? I feel like there are so many things we could be talking about, but
Yeah, we were going to talk about teacherless learning. Um,
I wonder what what you're doing in Oregon. I mean, you've lived in the Midwest, so I live in the Midwest. I live in, you know, a liberal city in a college town. But still, it's the Midwest. It's a little more conservative, I would say, in general. I don't know, that's probably not true. That's too much of a generalization. I take that back. But I wonder if you feel like what you're doing in Oregon, you could have done in DeKalb. You know, like if you feel like there would have been a need for it, you know, that kind of child-led home wasn't present as much in DeKalb. So do you feel like you could bring that child-led learning into the lives of these students?
Probably, I wasn't a parent when I lived in DeKalb, so I probably had no idea. And honestly, when I moved to Oregon, I only had a baby, so I really wasn't, I didn't have much of a grasp of what that was. But so, yeah, I can't say for sure, but my gut says absolutely that would have been great in DeKalb. That was
What would you have in like let's say knowing what you know now, if you were to have your studio you had then, what would you try to institute that wasn't there?
um, hmm. Well, that's actually the place where I had the every other week students doing their own group class. So that,
Although,
you know, the similarity between the program and DeKalb and here, I mean, I love that program like so much. And if I could be two people and teach in two places, I'd be there right now. I loved it. Um, but I think the similarity is this sort of cozy, big family feel to the program. And I think when you have that, then like the thing where you're saying where like the bullying and stuff happened, I couldn't imagine in a million years that happening because the families in my studio know each other like so well, and the kids know each other, and like at the end of group class it's always this like, who's having dinner at whose house, like, so it's very hard to imagine a teacherless experience going wrong because the level of accountability and trust and the relationship is so strong. So could it work in DeKalb? Absolutely. Could it have worked in New York? I don't know, because the relationships, you know, people just didn't know each other as well. It's such a big city.
Oh, that's interesting. So you attribute it to that feeling of continuity within your studio?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And it's not something that would work for every teacher for sure, because different boundaries are just really comfortable for different teachers.
I wonder if you could also talk a little bit about Alfie Cohen. So he's a big influence on you, is what you're saying, right?
Yeah. Ever since I've read his stuff. Punished by Rewards was, oh, this is going to be a small tangent. Do we have time? I don't know how much time we have. I'm not aware of anything.
Actually, I was wondering how much time you have. You have kids.
Planned for the rest of my life.
So,
Making that joke in the pandemic. No, I'm not teaching today. This is my week off, so I'm good.
okay, we could go for a little bit then. Yeah, I'd like to maybe in another 15 minutes or so.
So, Punished by Rewards was really great, and I think a lot of people have read that book, and it confirms what I have experienced my entire life, which is there is nothing more demotivating than a star chart. Like nothing makes me more like compulsively fail and like do everything at my very worst and feel awful than any sort of reward demerit system. And that's not true for everybody. Like I have some students that are like, they themselves star charts and they just have so much, it's just fun for
Right,
them.
right. It depends on the kid too, right?
You know, Gretchen Rubin? No, she has nothing to do with education. But she's very fascinating. She has this thing called the four tendencies, and the four tendencies are about how you respond to expectations. And some people, she says, respond to outer and inner expectations readily. Some people respond to outer expectations readily, but have more trouble answering to themselves. Some people respond to inner expectations, but are she calls them questioners, are less ready to meet outer expectations. And then there are some that rebel against both. So that's called the rebel. That's my tendency of the four tendencies. I resist outer and inner
I
expectations.
have a friend who I think she read this. This must have been the book that she read. Yeah, yeah.
My sister, on the other hand, is an upholder that meets outer and inner expectations readily. And my sister, if she makes a star chart, man, is she gonna have a fun day. Like it's not like it doesn't make her anxious. It's just fun. So Alfie Cohen talks about punished by rewards, and he's like, don't do this reward thing. And I really think he has a really good point that for many, many people, that really gets in the way of learning. But I can't say it's true for everybody just because I grew up with my sister, and like I don't think that was true for her. He also wrote Unconditional Parenting, which is really about kind of abandoning immediate outcomes and abandoning the idea that what you want to do is get your kid to do this right now or not do this right now more often. And that focusing more on how you want to treat them right now and what you want to model right now is the kindest and healthiest way to parent your kid. And it really does leave you hanging because if you happen to be having a phase where your kid is having a lot of tantrums and you feel like you're just gonna like go hide in the closet while your kid has a tantrum, he doesn't give you a solution for that. So it's hard to read that if you're in like a rough parenting spot.
How did you relate that to your studio teaching then?
It's the abandonment of outcomes that you kind of what you believe in doing, and you treat them right. And if it's not going right now, that doesn't mean it's going wrong in the big picture. But if you're forcing this outcome on this particular day, that also doesn't mean it's going right in the big picture.
Right, right, exactly. You know what I really like about what you're saying. I mean, you've been thinking about this for a lot longer than I have. So, I mean, I've kind of swung past where I'm comfortable actually in trying to let go. And I do think that I still need to explore it because I need to know where that outer limit is of how much I can let go as a teacher. I do think that there's a way to stick a bunch of kids in a room with one cello and they can come up with something great. You know, they're going to figure something out that's really amazing. But at the same time, I do think that I'm like the cello Google for them. You know, like them on Google is worse in some ways, than me in the room because it's too much for them to filter through. They don't have a screen through which to filter any of this stuff. So, what I like about your approach, though, is you really have come to a balance of what is I would call a more traditional older generational thing, I think, and then what's happening more in a newer sense is that child-led learning, which I think is not an unnew concept, but it is new in terms of more people are coming to it and interested in it. And I just like hearing how balanced you've come with those sides and how you've really found a way to do both. It's really been good to talk to you. I hope I can talk to you again. I was wondering if you had anything to add before we open it up to anyone who might want to comment or come off video and ask questions.
Oh.
Okay, so anyone who's out there, if you want to come on video and talk about anything, I know at least a few of you are really interested in this kind of thing anyways. Tammy Renner is here. I taught her daughter and she mentioned something to look at. Tammy, did you want to share that with the rest of us? She just shared it privately with me, but
Well, I'll start with this that I shared with everybody. This is just a great book, another old book on how to talk with children with respect.
can you
Um,
uncover the
oh,
author's name? There we go.
yes,
Wait.
and I should put it in the share. The other book I shared with you privately, I don't think it's for today, but it's for people who are interested, is called Hold On to Your Children, and I can't find my copy right now, but it basically talks about as we give our children a lot of freedom and choices as they go out into the world and with their peers. Some of the choices they're going to be offered are not necessarily safe for them to make. And so there's this fine balance, and Marie Montessori talks about that too, that there is a structure needed within that freedom. And perhaps that's what you experienced, Andrea, that day that you left your students alone. It was too much freedom, too quick, too soon, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
um, and then going back into my own teaching, I teach piano, and I started out with the traditional John Thompson, moved into Suzuki, became a Waldorf teacher, a homeschool mother, and I went through various pedagogies. And what I have come to at this point where I'm at is I have one book that I use for almost everyone. It doesn't work for everybody, on note reading at the piano that was developed by a friend my daughter Emily in Germany discovered. And I pretty much allow people to choose the type of music and genre they want. And that was really hard at first, that no junk song thought. But I've gotten to that point, and I have very happy students overall because of me letting down those expectations I was taught.
Tammy, do you find that they tend to take more ownership of what they're doing in the moment more than the way you had set it
I
up before?
I think they do, but of course there's a psychology of each child and each family structure situation that plays into it as well. Um, and some children, I think, oh, they're never ever going to find that intrinsic motivation, and then they'll completely surprise me and become the top student the next year, just practicing. Well, what is the top student? There's that judgment again, right? But they're constantly practicing and just achieving everything from intrinsic motivation. It just changes, and who knows what's in their mind and what's going on, right?
Exactly.
Thank you so much for today. It was beautiful.
Oh no, this is really great. Carol, I just realized there was another thing I was going to ask you. I wonder how you, if you had to summarize the outcome you want for your students after their course of lessons with you, how would you put that into words?
Let me think before I talk.
Yeah, that's, I should have warned you about that question. That question I've been asking people the last couple weeks, and I forgot to warn you.
Not going to sound right, so maybe I'll have to explain myself a little. I want them to be able to play really well because that's what I want for me. And I feel like if you're coming to me to learn the violin, first of all, the violin I just don't think is fun if you're not, if you can't make it, like if you listen to like Perlman play Preludium and Allegro and then you try to play the instrument that looks the same and it sounds like nothing like it, I just think that's so crushing. So I really want them to be able to play well, and I also I don't want it to be hard. And I don't think it's hard. I really don't think it's hard. I think that sometimes there are a lot of steps to getting into something, or sometimes it takes a lot of getting used to. Like you might have to like just let yourself live with something a lot before it feels good, but that doesn't mean, so yeah, I want them to play really well, and I don't want them to feel like it, I want it to feel great.
So, do you have a vision in your mind of what kind of music they're going to be playing with you?
I love to play classical music. I also toured with rock bands for a long time. I did a lot of studio work. So I definitely don't have like a junk music thing because I'm very eclectic. My dad is a guitar player and was a guitar player in Nashville, and he like ghost wrote songs for country singers in the like 70s, I guess. So there's no like musical, like, I mean, I think it's a pretty common thing to say musical snobbery about classical music. So I'm not ascribing that. I'm just using what I've heard. Um, no, if anything, I think my dad was like mildly bummed that I was into classical music, like because that's not his music, and like we like to play music together, but like I like to fiddle and I like to play rock and I love hip hop, and I don't know as much about it, but I'm learning more and more because my husband is learning a lot about it. And no, there's no music that I don't like. I will say it took me a while to warm up to the Handel sonatas. Handel was not my jam, but now I'm like having this like Handel like love thing. So I just no, there's no music that I would hope that they play, but I only know how to really teach like the classical tradition. That's what I know really well.
So, when you are with your students, you are using that canon of music, the classical canon of music, to teach them.
Every single thing to a point, and then I have my fake Suzuki books that go up to book 12, and yeah, no, I have a canon and I love that music. I really authentically, genuinely 100% love that music, and that is why I teach it. If there were another music that I secretly loved, I would be changing that around. And I would never like, I don't know anything about playing jazz. The only jazz I've ever played is like reading jazz charts for studio works. So if I had a student who was interested in a music that I don't know really, I would set them up with a teacher who knows it.
Could you tell me more about your fake Suzuki books?
So I just like wrote down like, here's what, so like it's kind of like Dorothy DeLay's concerto sequence,
Got it.
but I kind of have it plotted out because I'm teaching kids until they go to college, right? So I have like the college audition. I'm like, okay, December of senior year, we have to we have that as our kind of goalpost, and so that's like book 12 is having your college audition ready and just kind of working backward. I think I do that because I'm not a planner. I'm much more like go where the wind takes me. So I have it plotted out so that I don't miss anything, that's like super important. So yeah. I mean,
Right, that's funny because I feel like I plan out so much, but I think it's because I tend to not plan. And now it's like I've gone so far the other way. It's like, well, I've forgotten how to do it without the planning too. So,
I yeah, I'm very spontaneous. That's
I was wondering if anyone else wants to come on camera and say anything or ask anything. Otherwise, we could maybe wrap up. Oh, there we go. Hi, Martha.
Yeah, I was really interested in what you were talking about with the immersion method of learning a language, and sort of trying to figure out how this applies to teaching music. Um, and in my case, my two kids, we used to live in France, and we spoke English at home because that's what I spoke, and my husband's English was my husband, who is French, his English was better than my French. So, and then I used the excuse that I wanted them to be bilingual, my kids to be bilingual. So, but actually, I was just too lazy to learn French. But what I found with them, and then when we moved to the States, when they were 5 and 6, what I found again was that they would speak the language that was the easiest to be understood. It didn't have to do with immersion, it just had to do with how easily they could be understood and by the most people. So when we lived in France, well, everyone speaks some French in France, even their mother. So they could speak French to me, even though I was frustrated with it. And then exactly the same thing. As soon as we moved here, they all they wanted to speak was English, and they wouldn't speak any French anymore, which was again really frustrating because we wanted them to be really bilingual, but we couldn't force it. And so then I'm thinking about kids, for instance, kids who won't practice, who forget from one week to the next that they play the cello, or during the summer, which I'm dealing with right now. um, how do you incorporate that into your teaching?
are you
Sorry,
directing me or Andrea?
anybody.
Carol, why don't you take it first? I can jump in after.
My students sign a contract when they sign up for lessons. We have a deal, and they sign it, and their parent signs it, that they're going to practice every day. It's just part of the deal. That if they're signing up for lessons, we're really doing it. And I only have room in my life for a limited number of kids, and I want to make sure I'm serving the kids who really want to learn to play.
And what if they don't?
Then be asked to not re-enroll in lessons.
Okay.
That has
I'm
never
feeling way less guilty for the kid I fired yesterday.
practice, and that's different from like having a reason or a slump or like something human happen, you know? Like what if there's like an illness in the family? What if the parent has an illness, or they're, I don't know, there are a lot of things that could make a kid not practice, like that I would never, and I wouldn't bring it up. I would just like have a really nice time with them in the lesson. And the last thing I would do is like think they should be practicing if they have something major going on in life. But that's different from just being like, oh, haha, I don't practice, you know? And it doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
I would say for me, my theory about language and life actually is that everyone just wants to be heard, right? So when there's an argument, it's because both sides have an equal desire to be heard and they just can't listen because they haven't been heard yet. And I think with language, like you're saying, the bilingualism, my daughter will speak the language in which she can communicate the best. And that becomes her language with that person or in that situation. And it's not as fluid as I thought it might be, but I think there's this code between people of what the language is and it can change over time. But in terms of lessons, you know, I've been trying to get I'm going to post in the chat. I've got this intellectual crush on this guy, Steve Krashen. He's a prominent linguist, and I emailed him out of the blue and I said, I love your work. Can I hire you to talk with me for an hour? And I mean, he's like really a prominent linguist, and he called me on the phone 30 minutes later and just talked with me, and it was incredible. It was so much fun. But the thing that I came to in talking with him, he's the one that really is one of the big voices in there's no grammar, no vocab, that kind of thing, and the total immersion type of deal. And what I take from it is that when a student isn't wanting to speak the language of cello, it's because they feel like there's nothing to be said in that venue. And so it's not bad for them to quit, right? Like if you don't speak French well and there's no one speaking French around you, like it's not a loss. It's not like you're not losing by giving up French. You're just being really sensical. And so for some students, like that lesson dynamic isn't healthy anymore because there's no if it's one-way communication, it just doesn't feel good for anybody. And then it just feels like guilt. So that's okay, but what I try to do then is say, what is there then in between that we could give to see, do you want to still, because a lot of them still want to play the cello, or they still love me, right? So they might just like their relation, and if they like me and they're still willing to pay for lessons, I don't understand. I tell them, like, it's okay for you to just have lunch with me once a month if you want and not take lessons. It's okay. But some of them still want, I'm going to mute and unmute. I don't know what's happening with my sound. Anyway, so I think that it's important for them just to feel like that communication is there. And for some of it, it's worth it to have the lesson and just to be humans together in a room. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay if I just say, listen, are you going to not practice? I'm okay with that. If you don't practice, I'm okay if you just want to come here and shoot the shit. You know, I had a student that just graduated last year, and he'd be like, didn't practice again this week. I was like, well, you never said you would. So let's play some duets and make the best of it. And we would just hang out. And I think that that was really healthy. But we had established that his goal was not to practice cello every week. And I was okay with that. And his mom was okay with paying for lessons, even though he wasn't practicing. But the kid who wants to be the concerto soloist and first chair in the orchestra and win this competition and, you know, and then they don't practice, well, then there's a reckoning. And I feel like then there's a real balance that has to be had. But I do think that language, like the cello, we're really speaking through our instrument in a lot of ways. And if you don't feel that connection with it because you don't feel a need to speak through it, then that's a real thing to manage. If there's is there anything else that anyone else wants to add? Kara, this has been so just cleansing to talk with you. It's nice, you're so calm about it, and you have such a reasonable approach to involving all these ways of thinking about letting the kids lead the way. I just thank you so much for being here with us.